Hello viewers and welcome to this edition of Energy This Week. I'm Ademola Adedoyin. Our issue this week is the nation's chief revenue earner, the major source of our foreign exchange earnings, the main determinant of the nation's external reserve position, and the foundation on which our monoproduct economy is erected. This week, we are taking a look at crude oil and how local factors and global trends have conspired to put in great peril Nigeria's source of economic succor. But first, let's take you through events, activities, and development during the week.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the News of the Week. My name is Azizat Sani. First, the headlines. PPPRA laments domination of Nigeria's freight sector by foreigners. Pengasin urges federal government to commence work on new refineries. Now, the details. The PPPRA has expressed dissatisfaction over foreign ship owners' domination of Nigeria's oil, maritime, and petroleum products freight services. Speaking at the inauguration of 2 double-hulled oil vessels, MT Adeline and MT Emmanuel, acquired by Rain Oil Limited, Mr. Reginald Stanley, Executive Secretary, PPPRA, called for increased patronage of local vendor providers in ship-to-ship operations, saying this will help build a strong synergy among local ship operators. He added that the domination of the oil maritime services by foreign vendor providers is not in the best interest of the country, given the federal government's transformation agenda aimed at boosting the capacity of indigenous operators to play active role in Nigeria's economic development. According to him, a situation where foreign vendor providers dominate the market should be discouraged, adding also that the newly acquired vessels would boost maritime operation and reduce the unit cost of freight. The Petroleum and Natural Gas Association of Nigeria, Pengasin, has decried the non-commencement of construction works on the 3 greenfield refineries 2 years after the government promised to build the refineries. The association's president, Mr. Babatunde Ogun, at a recent media chat noted that there will not be any appreciable development in the oil and gas industry in Nigeria until the refineries are built. According to Mr. Ogun, his association's position was that real growth will continue to elude the industry until the refineries are built, and Nigeria start processing other natural resources locally instead of exporting the raw materials for dollar exchange only. That's all for the News of the Week. Thanks for watching. Join us again next week. I am Azizat Sani.
Welcome back to the issue of the week. Having achieved little in diversification over the years, Nigeria's economic fortune is tied to the fate of its hydrocarbon resources, especially crude oil. This resource accounts for 70% of federal government's budget and 90% of the nation's foreign exchange earnings. For this year, the federal government's projection is a production of 1.562 million barrels per day and a projected price of $17 per barrel. But since the beginning of the year, everything that could go wrong has been going wrong, and local and global trends are making a mess of government's revenue projections. Oil production in the first quarter of the year, for instance, averaged 1.9 million barrels a day, some 22% below the 2.562 million barrels per day projection in this year's budget. Crude oil price in the global market has remained unfavorable, recording a decline of about 14 to 16% from the 120 barrels per day in February to the current $107 per barrel. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, put the nation's revenue loss during that quarter at some $1.23 billion. That's about 190 billion naira. The corporation blames the drop in production and revenue on incessant theft of Nigeria's crude oil and vandalism. The corporation blames the drop in production and revenue on incessant theft of Nigeria's crude oil and vandalism. Observers, however, insist that global trend in crude oil market is an additional factor. Analysts have expressed concern that the situation is getting worse by the day and that the economy faces grave danger in the months ahead, even if government spokespersons are insisting all is well. To do justice to this subject and to bring the points at issue out in vivid details, we sought out the respected political economist, academic of note, social activist of repute, original thinker and communicator, Professor Pat Utomi. Prof, thanks so much for gracing this occasion, for committing to talk to us this evening. We really want to talk to you about crude oil and find out a few things from you. Thanks so much once again for finding out time to be with us.
Glad I could join you.
Now, Prof, let's start by taking a look at the bleak and worrisome picture of crude oil since the beginning of this year. Actually, by the end of the first quarter, even NNPC came out with its report in April, saying that Nigeria has lost about $1.23 billion. That's about 190 billion naira as a result of fall in oil production. And experts, analysts insist that even the fall has continued to be even more serious in the months after the first quarter of the year. Now, given this scenario, what is your assessment of the situation?
The situation is frightening, it's bad. But, sometimes you have to see the other side. Maybe the situation should get bad so that this our dependence on oil can be shaken off our mentality. But the situation is bad. That's the truth of the matter. Economics of this oil economy is not one that can sustain progress. If you fly over the Niger Delta, the place is littered with refineries. Crude refineries stealing from the pipelines, damaging the pipelines, and more importantly, damaging the environment. That is the part that pains me so much. People in the communities don't understand really what we're talking about. Because partly the oil companies state the thing poorly. They state it as, hey, look at all the oil being stolen. Look at its impact on NNPC receipts. Look at its impact on the oil companies' receipts. Most of the people in those communities couldn't care less what NNPC gets, what oil companies get, whether the Nigerian FAC account is funded, because it does nothing to their lives. It's just taken away from them. What is really frightening is that they are trying to steal this crude oil, whoever they are that are doing it. They are despoiling the environment in a way that is almost ensuring that these people who live in these communities, their children and their children after them, will live in unbelievable poverty.
Now, Prof, there's this contention out there that even the elite we're talking about, it will get to a stage where the looting will have to end because there will be nothing to loot again. Mm-hmm. For instance, when you look at what has happened now, since the beginning of this year, price of crude oil has declined consistently. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was $120 by February. Now it's just a little over $100 per barrel. More crucially, look at our excess crude account, which has been depleted. It was 9-point-something billion in January. Now it's just about 5-point-something billion. You know, by April, when the states were going to share their money, they shared just about 519 billion, as against 888 billion, which they shared the previous month. So the picture I'm trying to create is the scenario where the economy is actually headed for crisis. And how did you see this?
Well, it's real. Before it sounded like fiction, but it's real. We should have been, outside of the crude oil stealing, anticipating a decline in revenues from oil for a long time. And that's my worry about this unthinking elite that runs Nigeria. Systematically, the world has been trying to manage the challenge of this dependence. If you don't mind my tracking it historically again, back in the 50s, oil cost nothing. I mean, nothing. But so it was so marginal, the cost of oil, that, oil-producing countries didn't make much money. The consuming countries got it for so little. And they didn't give any thought to alternatives because it was so cheap. Indeed, one of the great examples is one of the major producers back in the 50s was Venezuela. Yeah. And Venezuela elected a president called Betancourt, who was pro-American. We had a lot of insurgencies in Latin America in those days, communist insurgencies. So Betancourt was pro-American, and he thought, okay, that credential could help him. He flew to Washington, tried to persuade Americans to pay more for crude oil so that they can have enough revenues and fight the communist insurgencies and all of that. And he was giving lessons in economics that, look, that's what it's worth. You can't be paid more than it's worth. So Betancourt was very bitter, went back home very bitter, and one day he jumped on the plane and flew to Baghdad. That's how OPEC was founded. And in the founding of OPEC, that cartel created conditions that led to oil prices going up. And then, dramatically following the Yom Kippur Arab-Israeli War in 1973, things changed. Now, in those years, countries like ours began to earn so much from crude oil. Any remotely intelligent person should know that that was a moment for savings and for use of those savings to grow the economy broadly. Instead, we allowed it to push us into Dutch disease and all the challenges of economic management that came from high oil prices, what they did to exchange rates and the profitability of agriculture and all of that. All those problems led us into a structural adjustment program. In 1979-80, during the Iranian Revolution, when oil prices went past $40 a barrel, it was, I still remember a cover, one weekend in which both Newsweek and Time magazine had the same words on their cover, the world over a barrel. That's when it crossed the $40 mark. And anybody who was smart at that time knew that it was time to begin to move away from a dependence on oil. Not Nigeria. Now, we were done service and disservice at the same time by the ascendancy of China and India. Normally, volatility in oil prices are like this. It will just come down, go up, come down, go up, causing all the disruptions in our economic planning. But because of India's surge and China's ascendancy, the demand was such over a consistent period that the regular cycles that oil had become, known for, and the volatility seemed to have, it's going to be forever. Now, the prices have been high enough that the investments are being made in these other countries where it was not profitable to make those investments in the past. So today, the Americans are beginning to talk of self-sufficiency. A wholesale, business is providing alternatives. And so Barack Obama can say to you, we wouldn't be needing your oil.
Prof, I was talking about some of the internal challenges that we have. Look at the issue of crude oil theft. Now, it is estimated that Nigeria loses about $6 billion per annum in oil theft. This year, a budget that was predicated on 2.5 million barrels per day is said to be recording about 1.7 million barrels per day as a result of the activities of oil fields and all that. And the Minister of Finance came out to say Nigeria could be losing about 300,000 barrels per day. Now, have we lost into this important and very powerful thieves?
That's a good point, towards the end there, because I was going to say to you, the oil is not being stolen by my grandmother. It's being stolen by the same people in power. That's the truth of the matter.
So the Nigerian state has lost it out again?
Well, the Nigerian state was, I'm not sure maybe is not the right way to put it. The Nigerian state, unfortunately because of the collapse of culture, has become progressively a criminal enterprise. That is the truth of the matter. And nobody seems to bat an eyelid. And things go across these shades. And so powerful people are engaged in whatever we call it, whether it's oil theft, or we call it bunkering, however nice we want to be about it. But it is not a group of rascals who failed school sat around the corner who are doing these things. They are powerful, well-connected people with private jets who have even begun to mix up with Colombian mafia and the like to systematically rip the Nigerian people off. And when the state fails to be able to control that kind of thing, the state has lost its legitimacy.
Prof, we look at investment in the auction sector because one crucial issue that we've observed in recent times is the fact that investment is dwindling. Even the IOCs that are here already are reducing their investment and selling their assets and all of that. Now, what is responsible for this? One, no appropriate fiscal terms, attractive fiscal terms. In the last 30 years, we've been battling over putting up a legislation which we've not been able to do. So because of this, investors are not enthusiastic about our climate. Now, this has been compounded by the fact that there have been emerging countries who have made discoveries, East Africa, Angola,
West Africa,
yes, and so on and so forth. Now, given this scenario, you still come back to say Nigeria has got the potential with hydrocarbon reserves in excess of 37.2 billion barrels. You know that we have some great potentials. My question is this: how do we get back on track? What do we do to make us number one investment haven, the first port of call in Africa? How do we get back to that?
We've got to realize that economics is about incentives. Unless people get the right incentives, they will not make certain moves. It's about risk reduction. If the risks are too high, people will not get involved in economic transactions, or they will put up things that will essentially protect them and therefore make transaction costs very high, and competitiveness is lost. So we need to think about creating incentives, mutually beneficial arrangements with our partners, whether they be IOCs or indigenous entrepreneurs who are going to go there, because the risks are still the same risks. And secondly, we need to ensure that all the stakeholders are on the same page, that they see the benefits that come from oil exploration as shared. If they're not on the same page, then we'll be spending too much of our time dealing with all these things that create an environment that is not conducive. In that regard, therefore, this business of a legislation that is purposive is a useful thing. But I think that we've played around with this so-called PIB for so long that it lost its meaning, and it sent a signal to the oil companies that Nigeria is not serious about the environment. And so the investments have been moving. Angola has overtaken Nigeria as an oil-producing country on this continent, and that's a crying shame. Then you've got fields coming up in Ghana. You've got fields even in Uganda, in Kenya, and all these places. So I think that what used to be Nigeria's territory, now everybody's domain. So there's competition. And the more we become serious in terms of incentive regimes that go when there's a competitive environment, the more it is likely that we can take advantage of people that there are people already on ground. They don't have to make new moves. It's just a matter of marginal expansion of their investment framework, and we can move forward. I think that politically we have managed oil industry badly. We need serious people who are professionals in the oil industry, who are committed to Nigeria's long-term best interest, rather than buccaneering politicians take responsibility for this sector. The PIB I want to talk about, because a lot of talk about PIB. I think that a comprehensive law is a good idea. However, we've now pushed it so far that it is too comprehensive, too complicated, and given our history for implementation, impossible to implement if we passed it today. So we need to break these things down and just proceed in a more purposeful manner, rather than catch all that won't fly.
We are going to lose a lot of revenue this year as a result of oil theft, as a result of activities of other countries discovering crude oil and shale oil and all of that. So to me, it looks like, hey, this is urgent. We got to do something like yesterday. What will you call on the government to do in the area of bringing back the investors, in the area of ensuring that the issue of oil theft is curtailed and getting the country back on track? Because this has very serious implication for the economy.
You know, in Nigeria, we have a history of developing some, should I call it, catchphrases for dealing with problems. One of those catchphrases is a national emergency. And really, oil is in a national emergency right now. We want to bring together serious-minded Nigerians who've been in the oil industry for a long time to say, there's a crisis here. Where are your networks? Where are your contacts? Where are your ideas on how to bring this industry back on track? We need a national oil emergency conference, and we need to take out the kind of people who are in the oil industry today from that business and create a new regime of really committed Nigerians, not political wheeler dealers, to set a new platform for the industry. We need to look at a strategic security issue in the oil producing areas and work out fair deals for people there while ensuring that we have in place capacity for intelligence and forceful action to prevent violation of the law. I think these are things that have been done around the world. It's not rocket science. It can be done by people who are committed, who have a conscience, and who want to do it. The reason it's not being done is, I dare to say, these people who are there don't want to do it. If they want to do it, it will be done.
Okay. PIB is looking at unbundling NNPC, for instance, in such a way that a national oil company will emerge from what we have now, and it will be such that it will work, like you have Petrobras of Brazil, Petronas of Indonesia, and all that. And so that in the final analysis, you have a state oil company that is active, that is ready to take up what it's supposed to do, in such a way that Nigeria now benefits maximally from its resources.
You know, I was visiting the bookstore at the World Bank a couple of years ago, and I saw a book on patriotism and national development. I thought it was a new territory, patriotism and development. One of the reasons a national oil company has not gone anywhere is there's a patriotism deficit in our country. Very honestly, I have been part of several delegations to visit Petronas in Kuala Lumpur, and one of the sad things about it is that when you carry on and on, they just laugh at you. See, some of our best people in Petronas are Nigerians, the people who built it up, you know. So there is this patriotism deficit that's allowed us to become a global joke. Look the Brazilians, the Mexicans, and what has happened with deep offshore, the expertise that they have, because their people wanted to focus on something. Petronas is now probably the 7th biggest oil company in the world when you add the majors. Yeah. An NPC could have been ahead of Petronas, but for the patriotism deficit in Nigeria. And that's a function of leadership.
This is really serious. Now, let us look at the global trend. What has become obvious is that our traditional customers, as it were, like the US, for instance, has made it clear that, look, we are not going to need your energy any longer. In fact, in the last 6 months, US has cut its demand for Nigeria's crude by about 50%, and it promises to do more in the months ahead. That spells trouble. And when you look at Europe and Asia markets, which you could say are readily available, of course, other emerging countries, East Africa, Ghana, Angola, and where does this leave Nigeria?
Well, I'll drink the oil. You know, sometime in January of last year, an Oxford economist called Paul Collier wrote a piece that appeared in Business Day. And he made the point that unless something goes dramatically differently future generations of Nigerians will hold their forebears before the court of history, have them accused, and hold them in contempt. We've prepared ourselves to be held in contempt by our children and their children because of the way we've mismanaged Nigeria's oil industry.
And when we look at the local factors we have pointed out now and the global trends, something is very obvious.
See, there's so many trends. First of all, for a long time, people talked about peak oil. Then you have all these alternatives. Then you have an increasing strategic commitment of the United States not to go back to a situation where they were held hostage like in 1973. It all adds up to the fact that we better begin to find use for our own crude oil, or it will just be something in the ground.
I'm going to ask the same question again, Prof. So, you see, what is the way out of this gloomy danger? Because the problem now, is that we probably could be faced with a 1982 situation where price of crude oil will fall to as low as whatever.
It not only fell in 1982, actually in 1998 it fell to less than $10 a barrel. But in 1982, there was a 2-week period in which Nigeria did not sell 1 barrel of crude oil. It can happen again. And then all these politicians running around will have nothing to spend.
And there is no way out of this gloomy danger.
Well, like I said, we can call a national summit, a national emergency conference on where to go with the oil industry. Maybe some good ideas will come up. There are many good ideas out there, but we can't continue the way we are going. Not with the same kind of guys who are running the oil industry. No country makes progress with such.
One day, we had a vision to improve the way people access their fuel products. Now, 1 in 5 cars drives on our fuel. But that was not enough. So we pioneered the provision of cleaner, safer fuel to local industries through the fastest growing gas supply network in sub-Saharan Africa. Still, that was not enough. So we invested in the acquisition of rigs for oil and gas exploration. We strive towards our future when we, a proudly Nigerian company, will offer the complete solution to Nigeria's energy needs. Owando, the future is here.
Well, viewers, you've heard it all. That the Nigeria's economy faces a certain looming danger is not in contention. What is of concern here is how to steer the ship of the nation's economy away from the turbulent waters and avert a major unfavorable occurrence. Your views are as important as those offered by our respected guest, Professor Utomi. Feel free to send such views to us through info@energythisweek.tv. For more on this issue, please visit our website, energythisweek.tv. Till I come your way next week, I remain yours truly, Ademola Adedoyin. See you.